Okay, after that very, very long setup, we're actually here and we're writing codes. Writing code. So, what are we looking at? When you think about a text editor, think Notepad. Think plain text on a page, nothing special. That's what code files are. And these code files are sent through a program, an application, that takes all of our code files, puts them together, and reads all of these characters from the words and the spaces in between the words, the braces, all of these things, reads them, puts them together, and creates a file that the computer can understand. Because right now, the computer actually can't understand what these words are. I can as a human, and C# is a high-level language. That is, I can use math symbols, parentheses, and I can use brackets, braces, I can use English words, and I can program using those words at such a high level that I can understand them more easily as a human programmer. But at some point in time, this text file has to get filtered and sauteed and, not saute is not the word I'm looking for, reduction. It has to be reduced to the binary that can fit on RAM, that can be understood by a CPU, that's the ones and zeros and the electrical impulses. Obviously, these are not electrical impulses. There's a compiler. This compiler is called CSC.exe. And when I talked about the integrated development environment aspect of Visual Studio, there's a compiler within it that when I click Start, that compiler takes all of these files that are in my program, compiles them, understands them, and takes the input of my text and outputs a version of code that can be understood by the computer. So we're actually programming in English language and math symbols. So think of it in those terms. Right now, don't try to understand the ones and zeros. I know that sounds antithetical to what we're trying to do here. Don't try to understand the ones and zeros. Don't try to understand all of the details of machines and understand CPUs and everything else. Just think about you sitting down for the first time writing an English essay as a fifth grader. You've got some words, you understand those words, and you're going to put those words together, and some magic happens. You write a story. Some magic happens here, and you write a program. So, follow along at first here. Just learn by example and learn by working with me, and then I'll explain the theory behind it afterwards. You're going to have to take a leap of faith, a step of faith with me. So inside of these braces right here, I want you to make a space, make a couple spaces, give yourself some room. We're operating within here, within these braces. I want you to write console.writeLine hello world. Type it exactly like I wrote it. Console.writeLine parentheses, open parentheses, double quote, hello world, double quote, parentheses, semicolon. I want you to write one more line. Console.read key, semicolon. That's it. Now, see, a couple of things are happening here. This lit up as opposed to these being darkened. So some things are happening. Visual Studio is interacting with us. And actually, if you'll notice, when I typed in console. It was giving me some suggestions. This is called IntelliSense. This is very useful. This is one of the things that makes Visual Studio so wonderful. And we'll get into what that is, but it helps with code generation. It helps with giving you suggestions on anticipating what you're trying to write to make you a more productive programmer. So that's what you're seeing with these boxes. So go up here, click Start. and you have a program. Hello world. Excellent. So it's not a far stretch to see, okay, I don't know a lot about C#, but I know something was happening, and I know that it has something to do with this. Because what I typed inside of these parentheses, I actually saw on the console. But I didn't see these quotes. So let's run it one more time. Click Start. There are no quotes, but there is Hello World. Now, let's type something else. Let's type a name. Your name. I'll type my name in. Okay, so we're interacting with the program. Now, the reason I typed read key, if we take read key out, if we delete it, and you click Start, it disappears. So our program actually successfully runs, but it doesn't stay up there long enough for you to see what actually happened, what you're doing. So console.readKey gives us the opportunity to see what we did, and then hit a key, read a key, and then the program will close. So what I want you to visually understand here is that programs have very specific structure. That's how the compiler that I discussed earlier can read this text and produce machine code, or produce what's called intermediate code, IL code. But how it can take our text and put it in another form is it has to have a very specific structure. It's another computer program that has a specific structure that needs to be able to read this. That's called a syntax. That structure, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the meaning of the code that we write, whether I wrote Hello World or Isaac Swindle. It has to be a specific structure. Think about putting a square peg when you were a child and you had that little box with the holes on the top, a square peg and a square hole, and a round peg and a round hole, and a triangle peg. Well, if you try to stick a square peg in a round hole, it doesn't work. Same thing with a compiler. If you try to mess up with the syntax, let's delete one of those braces. You get an error. You see this little red squiggly? Uh-oh, something's not right. If I try to run the program, oh, there are build errors. It didn't work. Building means that it was trying to take this code and build it into something that we can run. So it has to have a specific syntax, a specific structure. That structure is created with something called punctuators. But don't worry about that word. Look, watch what we got here. We've got namespace for steps. We have a brace. Inside of that brace, we have a class program. We have some braces. Inside of that, we have whatever this means, and we have some braces. You can understand that there's a pattern coming about here. We've got a structure. This has something, and inside it is contained as a class. And inside of this class, there's something else called main that contains something else that contains something else. Now, I want to show you one quick thing. It's called a comment that you can write in code. If you hit / comment, you can type code that the compiler looks at and says, oh, that's not a program, that's information that's meant for another developer. I'm writing a comment in the code. That's not executable code. That doesn't get picked up by the compiler as anything important. I'm going to be writing comments as we're going through code like this in the next video and further on. But for the most part, I wanted you to see we've made our first program and there's some things happening. So fiddle around with this. Inside of these quotation marks, take the quotation marks out and see what happens. You'll start to see that there's a very specific structure for programs. So what I'm going to tell you is try it out.